Alright, Michael Van Runkle here with HotCars.com, continuing on with the Porsche 914 project. Today I'm going to be working on the two transaxles that came completely removed from the car. In my last video I stripped and drained the engine to prepare it to take it to the machine shop. Today I want to do the same for the transaxles so that I can take them to a shop and hopefully they can cannibalize them into one side shift, much more desirable later year 914 transaxle. When I dropped the engine off at the machine shop, the mysteries began immediately, and I'll be covering some of that in this video. But for now, let's dig into these two. I know I want to remove this shift rod, and I'm not really sure how this all connects in there. You can see there's definitely two nuts and studs there, but I'm not sure how they come apart. In the meantime, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It makes a huge difference for us. When I dropped the engine off at the machine shop, the guy immediately says, "Hey, that's a Volkswagen bus engine," which isn't really a big deal. He could tell because the dipstick was in a different location to allow for better access in the bus, which would have been rear-mounted, versus the 914, which is mid-mounted and has a vertical dipstick. But other mysteries have unfolded since then, and the engine project is looking like something of a mess that could take a while. The real problem is, on that engine was a 228mm flywheel, which the machine shop owner, George, explained to me is too deep to allow the Porsche 914 transaxle to even make with the engine. That really makes it seem like maybe this car wasn't ever running. I got bamboozled a little bit. But it's weird because the engine did have that 914 exhaust system on it with the heat exchangers and the Monza exhaust when I bought it. So the question is, did he bolt that on? It did come off pretty easily. But that seems like a lot of work to go through just to make like maybe a couple of hundred extra bucks. Then again, maybe it was worth it to him. The real question for me is one of these bell housing areas where the flywheel and clutch enter the transaxle, has it been machined to fit a 228mm flywheel? That would be an absolutely crazy idea because just machining it would cost 5 times more than buying the flywheel itself. You can get a cheap one for like $100, and it just doesn't make any sense. So that's a mystery. I want to measure these two and see if they match. To my eye, they do, but I want to be a little more sure before I take this in and talk to the guys at the transmission shop. So I'm not really sure what I'm measuring here. The width is just shy of 10 3/4, but I've got this in the way. The depth looks like almost exactly 1 7/8, and that's on the tail shift transmission. I don't understand how a deeper flywheel could even be machined to go in there. You can see these little grooves. You can see where the bolts go in. It just doesn't make any sense. It's dirty, but it doesn't look like it's been worked over. Let's compare it to the other one. Now, first of all, this one's a lot cleaner, which is a plus. It's also about the same diameter across, although really I should be going this way, above there. It looks the same to me, but we're talking about thousandths of an inch. The depth to this little groove, also 1 7/8. So I really don't know what's going on here. This is going to be a question for the pros. The big difference between these two transaxles is that this one, that was allegedly on the car, is sort of the 901 design. It's the tail shift, as it's known, because they basically took a 911's transmission and flipped it around. Unfortunately, that meant that the shifting mechanism was about as far as it could be from where it connected to the actual transmission. So for 1973 and later cars, Porsche redesigned the gearbox to be what's called a side shift. This is supposed to allow for much cleaner, crisper shifting motions, which is what I'm hoping for, because the 914 is super notorious for having an absolutely terrible shifting mechanism. Next up, I want to remove this entire shift mechanism unit, as much so the rod and the pieces don't get any more damaged in transit. I think it's just 2 nuts holding this on, and then this will pop right off. very thin washer. Well, now that I see this, I think this is going to have to go with us. But I'm going to keep it separate just in case. This also gives us a pretty good view inside the transmission. It's definitely completely empty of oil that's been drained out the other side, but it all looks pretty clean to me. Then again, I'm a complete amateur, as we know. Well, I'm just going to leave these two guys back on here with the washer. But being able to see in there, to see the gears, reminds me of another little fun detail. When you've got a transmission out of the car like this, it's pretty easy to see whether you've got a limited slip differential, which you can see I'm turning clockwise or counterclockwise, and this is spinning in the opposite direction. So that means I've got a standard differential in this transaxle, and the same in this one, even though it's a lot dirtier. But knowing that, before I started the transaxle rebuild process, I ordered an automatic torque biasing differential from the guys at WaveTrack, and I'm really excited to get that installed in this box when it's torn down. It's a pretty beefy unit, and WaveTrack claims that this differential is superior to other automatic torque biasing differentials because it doesn't cause a loss of drive during low traction situations with no axle load. I'm really excited. It was a little expensive, but luckily Joe Biden just gave me a hefty chunk of change, and I spent most of it on this differential that's going to go right in that super old VW Porsche transaxle. I'm going to bag all this up and get it ready to haul down to California Motorsports, which is located somewhat strangely in Havasu City, Arizona. But one thing that seeing all these gears reminds me of is that I've been learning a lot about gear ratios. Now apparently, the 914 had different gear ratios inside the transaxle than the 911 did. Part of that is because the 911 needed to have a higher RPM at freeway speeds to keep the fan spinning faster to cool 6 cylinders more efficiently. The 914 at highway speeds has longer gears, it can be at lower RPMs, and that fan will still cool only 4 cylinders. So the question is, once they get in here, are they going to be able to reuse all the hard gears? Or are they going to have to replace them? And if so, do I want to go with 911 gear ratios or 914? Theoretically, the 911 would be a little sportier, but I'm not so sure what we've got in here to begin with. The other question is, and this is pretty cool, Roger at California Motorsports was explaining to me that you can take the input and output gears for 5th gear, for example, from a 914, flip them around, and then you would have shortened gearing for 3rd gear compared to a 911, which would be even shorter than the 914's original 3rd gear. So it gets pretty complicated, and it leaves me in a position of having to make decisions about what kind of gear ratios I want without really knowing what it's like driving a 914 with super short gear ratios. Yeah, it'll help put more torque to the ground, but I also want something that's not going to be revved up to 5,000 RPM when I'm cruising around at 80 miles an hour. That'll be something that I'll have to create a spreadsheet and do some graphing about to really figure out what kind of gear ratios I want. Right now I know this one is drained of oil. The question is the other transaxle also drained of oil? I'm going to try and pull out these drain plugs, they've got to be somewhere, and see whether this thing is full of oil. It should be about 3 quarts if it is. It's dry in there, I think. It's a good thing I've got a 17mm hex. The last question for today is what to do with this rear case cover for the transmission. This thing just fell off while we were moving. Look at these tiny little needle bearings that are in here. We've got some other drain plugs for this box. We've got some random studs. This had a socket on it. It just fell off when we were moving this around. I'm starting to believe that the previous owner might not have known really what was going on with this new 73 transaxle or the tail shift original transaxle that he claimed he pulled from the car connected to the engine. But that engine story doesn't make any sense either. either, so it sort of seems like the mysteries are only growing, which is part of why I'm so excited to get these down to California Motorsports so that they can tear them down and really solve some of the mysteries. Thanks for watching, and please, once again, like this video and subscribe to our channel. It makes a huge difference for us.